This is a speech by the Deputy President of the United States, J.D. Vance. This is from a couple of days ago, and it's absolute gold. I mean, I don't really know who J.D. Vance is. I hadn't even heard of him before Donald Trump was elected as president. So I don't really have any thoughts on the guy. But this is absolute gold. So let's listen in to what he's got to say about free speech and how it's basically dead in Britain.
Not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America.
It's an interesting point he makes straight away. He's worried about the threat from within. And it is the threat from within that is the most dangerous, not the threat from without. They're generally obvious. It's from the traitors within our own ranks.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own.
This should send alarm bells ringing for people, because this guy that he's talking about, like he's just said there, he wasn't obstructing anyone. He wasn't causing any kind of trouble. He wasn't using a microphone. He wasn't speaking. He was simply stood there silently praying. Now, if you're an unbeliever and you don't believe in a God, why do you think that this is becoming an issue where they're basically arresting people for silently praying? You see, the devil's giving his hand away here, isn't he? He's showing his hand. He's overstepping, because this shows you that this in reality is indeed a spiritual war, or else why would they need to ban praying?
After British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person, but no. This last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law.
Let that sink in. Let that statement right there sink in. That the Scottish government sent letters out to people basically telling them that if they live within these certain zones, that even private prayer would be illegal. I mean, that's mind-boggling. The depths to which this United Kingdom, so-called, has stooped. They're going to reap the whirlwind in this nation, this island, this United Kingdom. We're going to reap the whirlwind.
Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across.
I mean, that's basically the Stasi, isn't it? Reporting on your neighbours. And I would imagine there would be people, unfortunately, quite elated that they'd be able to tell tales about their neighbours to the authorities, so-called.
Across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth.
You see, the reality is this: truth is actually more dangerous than any bomb. And this is essentially what the government in the UK, and indeed other countries like Canada, and he's mentioned here the United States, but in particular we're focusing on Britain. They want to ban freedom of speech, and essentially it is banned, because unless you're sort of saying things that are within the boundaries that they've set, then it's deemed a hate crime, or, you know, it comes under some terminology that they've concocted: religious hatred, you know, you're being hateful towards people of a different gender or a different sexual orientation. And in reality, it's all to stifle freedom of speech. That's what it is.
In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town. And under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it.
He makes a fair point there. He says that, you know, whether we disagree or agree with you, we're basically going to defend your right to say it. And that is the key to freedom of speech. We can't sort of, you know, only let people say what we want to hear. Basically an echo chamber. We're going down a very dangerous path here in the United Kingdom, and people should be extremely worried about it.